Hello and welcome to another Stompy 51 miniature adventure. Today we're going to take a look at some lightly kit-bashed Fireforge Games Folk Rabble that I've thrown together as part of a wider religious fanatic kind of themed empire miniature agnostic army for various systems like, Kings of War and Dragon Rampant, and there'll be some oldies but goodies thrown in along the way. Is there anything wrong with having a morbid fascination with crazed medieval religious zealotry, so long as it's kind of transported into this parallel fantasy universe? I guess as Brits, maybe it's because we tend to just take the mickey out of these things. Though I was reading a book by Simon Sharma, this British historian, the other day, and he basically made the case for how in order to understand the Spanish Inquisition, you shouldn't really see it as an expression of something sort of medieval, but really as a kind of forerunner of, like the modern Cheka and Stasi and KGB and, that kind of modern authoritarian ideological system. But hey-ho, when I opened the Saga Age of Magic book and saw the Order Militant sub-faction, I thought, you know what, let's do it. And so on to the miniatures. So let's start with our incensed rabble who have picked up their plowshares and gone to fight. Well, here we're going to say evil as opposed to pursuing ignorance. But anyway, so these are the Fireforge peasant rabble. I mean, one shouldn't underestimate peasants. I remember reading many years ago that, everyone makes out, medieval peasants were sort of just idiots, but that's because, they never really said very much in front of, the churchmen who wrote everything down, or their lords and knights, because, mouthing off in front of them tended to end very badly for you. But actually, to kind of run a farm in the Middle Ages without the kind of support one has these days, you can't be an idiot. So they were no fools. But here, they don't look too bad either. So these are the ones which are straight out of the box. The ones which kind of held a kind of a plowshare with two hands, I just couldn't get my head around the instructions. I couldn't get them to work, and that was probably just me, which means their poses are limited to the two-handed weapon options, where they're just two hands. And these are the ones which are the heads straight out of the box. Good to see women involved in the Crusades as well here. And I know people always say, what's the point of having their heads facing everywhere? They can't always be expecting an ambush. Mostly they're going to just be shouting and charging at the enemy. Oh, that's a bit of a small hand swap with the Fanatics Games Workshop sprue. There weren't too many mold lines. There's a little one you can see over there. And they've got, proper peasant weapons, that an axe or a little mini scythe, axe for chopping wood, scythes are basically the most weapon-like things they have. I mean, it is sad that there were only 15 because the box isn't that cheap, but they are very good quality. They're good quality. I based them, well, I suppose if it's miniature agnostic and you go for Saga Age of Magic or Dragon Rampant, it doesn't matter how you base them, but they can also, of course, be used in Mantic Games Kings of War. So I put them on these 20mm square bases, and this one's from 1984. And isn't it sweet to... I love marrying up the old and the new. It gives a sense of continuity and tradition and all that. Did this little base know in 1984 one day it would have a high quality plastic peasant stamped on top of it? Anyway, I must have got it second hand because I was not collecting in 1984. In 1984 even I was a bit wee. Anyway, so these are the ones where I tried something slightly different in terms of kit bashing. Okay, not her. Where are they? Right, so this one shows you that the heads of the Games Workshop fanatics, while slightly small, still fit just fine. He's unwashed Ned. No one likes to stand next to Ned, but you know, give him a scythe and he's on his way to fight the heathens like the rest of them. These are heads from Anvil Industries. I mean, they are slightly big, but some people do have big heads. And then these are heads from the Oathmark humans. He always looks slightly village. And so I think that head goes just fine with this. I always want to break out into the West Country accent every time we see his head. But, you know, you don't want to be in the way of that, do you? And that's from the same sprue, I believe, the same Oathmark human infantry sprue. So there you go. As I say, sad there's only 15 of them. I suppose I could get another pack, because I suppose you need 20. But the thing is, I could always put some kind of filler. I suppose maybe we could use him, because he would account for 4 more, so that would take it to 19. And then I just need to have a leader. How about him from Dunkeldorf Miniatures? Or his daughter, 2 witch hunters, beautiful metal from the Danish Dunkeldorf Miniatures range, which is clearly set in the old world. An axe and a sword in case the pistol just doesn't pan out at that moment. And he's gifted one to his daughter from the brace, bringing her up in the family business of demon hunting. But anyway, so he was a bit of a kit bash from about 2010, which is a zealot head on a pistolier body. And yeah, fire safety was not paramount in those days. It is sailing a bit close to the wind of his banner. I suppose, how would we do this? Dum-de-dum-de-doo. Dum-de-dum-de-doo. Oh, I've forgotten how much fun it is to rank things up. Well, roughly, there you go. Burn, burn, burn. Was that the Trolls cartoon from the 80s? There you go, so that would be your unit. And in Kings of War, in the Kingdoms of Men faction, I guess that they would be your militia mob. Well, only a regimented 20. Pretty cheap, of course, but not exactly your heavy hitters. Expendable. Yes, always expendable. I'd need to look up what that means. But I think we can guess. But anyway, we'll push these to the side for now and see what else we've got, because someone kindly suggested, instead of just showing individual bits and pieces, why don't I show the whole collection? And as we're going for the Faith Militant here, what else do I have? So I suppose the next thing is, we've got Valton, chosen of Sigmar, who's some kind of, I suppose, Samson-like character, Hercules-type character, where, I mean, look, he's even got long hair, where he's just some kind of little fellow, probably a blacksmith, but has been chosen by Sigmar, and so he takes his hammers into battle with divine inspiration. And in terms of scale, you know, he's still perfectly in keeping, albeit looks like a kind of a young Arnie or something. He's slightly he's not based correctly, but that could be easily rectified. And actually maybe he is more suited to being the person leading the peasant rabble at the back there. This is a Dunkeldorf miniature, and what I'd love to do with her is plonk her into the old-fashioned steam tank, but I can't find one for less than about 50 quid, and I'm not really willing to spend that. Because I do feel that this army could have some, heavy artillery. That's mobile. I can't remember what this guy's called. Some kind of warrior priest. Oh yeah, Luther Huss, or Luther Hus, which can't have impressed the large following that we assume that Warhammer Fantasy Battle had in the Czech Republic, because, as I vaguely remembered, Jan Hus was the leader of a proto-Protestant Christian movement, as it says here on Wikipedia, that led some kind of armed uprising. And I don't think they'd wanted particularly associated with the total lack of tolerance that we assume warrior priests of Sigmar show in the old world. And I've plonked him on this larger base because, again, in the miniature agnostic rules, it doesn't really matter. And I thought I would kind of paint this, black and red, the barding black and red. And here he is with his...
And also, bigger the base, the more power.
Well, it depends. Sometimes you wonder if there's more base if they are exposed to too many enemies. Anyway. So there he is. And then these are really a minority interest. White Knight Miniatures, who is just some fellow on the Little Adventure Forum who seems to have commissioned his own little range. And these look fantastic. Hannibal, a plan always comes together. A giant sword in that 1990s style. And they're very heavily armed. Very heavily armed indeed, and armoured. So I suppose with 2, 4, 6 of them, that makes them perfect. And these will certainly in Dragon Rampant for being a kind of elite foot. And they would be pretty easy to paint because they seem to be largely silver with black hats. I've never really liked these kind of beaky plague doctor masks. But you know what? He's part of the deal. Part of the deal. In terms of scale, I mean, they are chunkier because they are mirroring, quite rightly, the Perry's early 90s Empire foot. But, you would expect them, if you're wearing such heavily padded armour, to be that way. I could also be creative and paint the armour black and give it gold trim. And kind of lacquer it, but I don't think I'm going to bother doing that. Because it's all too much work. Anyway, who knows if these will ever be painted, but they're fun to look at. And then we have our mass of crazed fanatics. And unfortunately this fellow's broken. I'll fix him in a minute. They are quite prone to breaking. Anyway, they've been undercoated in one of the Army Painter light brown sprays. Is it Vermin Brown? And largely they are just straight out of the box, albeit they were splattered across the garage for many years and I had to find them all. Some are conversions, very light conversions, because I thought, can't they just have normal weapons which they've kind of picked up? So even that fancy little Germanic looking hand axe, well, someone noble is now lying with his head in the mud. And this crazed fellow who can't quite see but is guided by the light of the Lord.
He's decapitated, isn't he? The man on the floor who got attacked by an axe.
I don't think it's that gruesome. But you're right, this is generally quite a gruesome thing. My little goth girl.
Yay, I'm into it.
Someone's been playing a bit too much Roblox, methinks. Anyway, so these heads, that head is from, I think it's from the Frostgrave Sailors pack. I couldn't get it to quite fit in exactly, but he's in some kind of weird rapture, so he's just flailing about with his knife. This head from that Sailor's sprue looks fantastic, because he kind of looks properly like the Faith Militant from Game of Thrones, where I think they all kind of shaved their heads and have these weird Mohican haircuts. So he goes in just fine. And that head, I'm not really sure where that's from at all. No, I think that might be actually from the original Fanatics sprue. And there are 20 of these, so I managed to fish them all out. That's a good unit size. He's a noble fellow who's kind of found faith. Which again, I think is one, isn't that one from Game of Thrones as well? Where one of the Lannister cousins gets ill-used by Cersei and then gets found out and humiliated, but then finds succor in the Faith Militant. So that's him. These are straight up from the box. And more straight up from the box, he's saying, come on, bring it. And they are slightly weedier than the peasants. But then again, I suppose, you know, they've been fasting and flagellating their souls and all that. Afflicting their souls, as they say. Which strangely brings back a memory I have of when I was a child in my dad's office, sort of bored after school, flipping through the books on the shelf, and one of them was about mental health, and the first introductory chapter said, you know, look, mental health is a highly contextual, environmentally driven thing. What's perceived as, you know, a mental health issue in one generation wouldn't have been historically, and so you've got to consider that culturally as well. And they said, you know, if someone walks onto the streets of London in then 1990 and starts whipping themselves and screaming out to the heavens, you know, people will quickly call, you know, social services. Whereas at the height of the Black Death, if someone in London had walked out and started flagellating themselves and screaming out for redemption, that would have been seen as not normal, but, you know, understood in the context of the environment and people's understanding of causality in the world, and entirely rational in that value system. But interesting though that thought is, I don't think in the Warhammer Old World that these guys are portrayed as in any way mainstream. So that's them. I'm so thrilled I managed to pick this guy up for not very much about 10 years ago, when Mordheim stuff wasn't going for 50 quid a model on eBay. And he looks like, you know, one of the Medici princes who's kind of found hatred. And he's huge. He's absolutely huge. As you know, he's more in keeping with that kind of 1990s Games Workshop Empire style, but he's not really in keeping with these, albeit some people are just very big men, and maybe he's just a very big man, as they say in the Two Fat Lardies rules, when they describe kind of lords and nobles. He's just a big man. And then we have, I'm not sure how they fit in exactly, because so far what I've shown you is kind of faux medieval Christianity. But then we've got, I suppose, this theme again, which you see in Game of Thrones, this idea of a kind of, imagine there'd been no Christianity in medieval Europe, and instead you had all of these old pagan religions kind of developing, you know, like in the Northern Kingdom, whatever, where they worship these trees and forests with carvings, believing them to be gods of the wild and all that. So that's a Games Workshop priest of Ursa the Bear Rock. I can't remember what they were called. Maybe that's what they use there for Ursa for bear. Annoyingly, I've got sand stuck to the base with super glue, so I'm going to have to work out how to scrape that off without damaging a knife. Thoughts welcome on a postcard and comments. But that fellow White Knight, presumably inspired by the same thing, created a little set of special knights. And why can't they be part of the religious fanatic grouping here? Given that I have a priest, and they would be bringing two-handed mayhem to the action. And I'd have to find some kind of flag for that. Maybe nicking it from one of the various plastic sprues, although I don't have any plastic flags. I'll have to work it out. And how many of these are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Generally only need sort of groups of 6 or 10, so I'll have to work out what to do on that score. But they look pretty good. And again, they wouldn't be too hard to paint because they would be largely spray painted. Well, so that's a good question. So yeah, I find if you spray paint silver, undercoating silver creates a nightmare for all the other colours because you have to sort of do about 4 or 5 layers because the silver shows through. So I think I would paint these metallic grey, metallic colour, bolt gun metal, whatever it's called, wooden handles for the axe, and then some kind of dark brown with black claws for the pelts, and it wouldn't take very long at all. So actually this wouldn't take very long at all. I think all of it, I mean even these guys, I would just dry brush once for their threadbare clothes, and then it's just skin and metal. But anyway, one for the future, methinks. By the way, if you are interested in the Hussite Wars and learning a bit more, I found this perfectly interesting podcast in 3 parts, which I recommend. And do I print out loads of Hussite medieval war wagons, get Empire handgunners, put them in there, and then find a way to get the horses attached? I think the answer is no, because none of the miniature agnostic rule systems have rules for that kind of war wagon. And I think we'll leave it there. Anyway, thank you very much for watching to the end. Please do like, comment and subscribe and all of that, just to give me a bit of positive affirmation and kind of fuel my obsession with either, I suppose, fantasy chariots or fantasy fanatics. Comments in particular are welcome of any kind, questions, thoughts, because, it's just something fun to do when you're stuck waiting for a train. Either way, keep well, keep safe, and I hope to see you around very soon.